Hi, I'm Rachel Mathy, and I want to go through the first reading design that I identified and how I would address it using UDL. I also used a little bit of understanding by design. So the experiences that I wanted to look at from learning as an adult were I want to choose something from being in school, so from a professional development, and then I also wanted to try to choose something from my grad classes experiences. So the one from professional development was designing curriculum, and it was the way it was scheduled and the guidance given during it. And then what I chose from my experience as an adult learner in the grad classes was when I have really small online classes and how the restrictive guidelines and the set materials can cause for frustrating design. But with both of these, they hit different things on UDL from the engagement, representation, and action and expression. So I wanted to try to address how they could be improved in all three of those areas. The first thing I'm going to do is describe the problem with curriculum development. So what I noticed when I was asked to develop curriculum was we were given a set template. We were given a short time to complete it and then to turn it in. And there wasn't time for asking questions or going over definitions. And I go into a little bit in my paper. The resolution that I would have for this kind of a situation and that I would see in my future trainings with blended learning is to describe the process that we're going to use. So define the terminology, give examples of things that have worked, of things that you see in the building that are a variety across the curriculum. This helps to make everybody have the same understanding of vocabulary, so that's that expression and communication. It helps everybody to understand the starting point. It helps everybody to know the goal, which that is the first step of both UDL and UBD. The next thing is to give the people you're asking to do this time to try it out, which would be give them an initial time period to work on the curriculum documents or on whatever you are asking them to do. And this is all about that perception, gaining understanding, recruiting, engagement. And a big thing here is that just because I teach science doesn't mean that I love developing curriculum for it. And so this gives me time to kind of buy into that and meet with other people and talk about it. And then the third thing would be allow for revision and questions. And this could be done a couple of different ways depending on what you're doing. For me, what I envision is with blended learning, this would be everybody comes back together. But if it's something like developing curriculum, you could send one person to a meeting so it's smaller. You can bring a bunch of questions, go through it, make sure everything's okay, that you feel confident in that document and you'll actually use it in the future. Whereas from my experience, that document doesn't really get used anymore. And so that's all about that providing feedback, making sure everything looks good, making sure everybody's on the same page. And then if you need to keep going back through and redefining or redescribing or resetting goals, you can. So that's why I chose the cycle for this. Then for the grad class, what I wanted to identify was the problem with small online classes. So I noticed when I specialized in grad classes, I went down to classes of 2 or 3, and things became a lot more difficult because they're specialized, but also because the limitations became more restrictive when there was less people. So I wanted to highlight the discussion because I thought this was the most clean cut, where you have an initial post and then you have to do replies. And the problem comes down to with time management and really just understanding and engagement of not having a lot of action going on in the discussion posts. So you have an initial post on Thursday. I like to think of everything, reading everybody's posts, kind of having that processing time and then having time to have that reply. That goes away with small online classes where you're really just having your post, reading somebody else's post and going back and forth. And from an experience with Jeremy, we would have very similar ideas in discussions. So there wouldn't be a lot of processing that would go along. So something that I had as my resolution was have other resources on hand. And I talked about how I got this idea from our class where you would post different things about here's an infographic, or here's something that I'm thinking about, or this is a little dated. How are we doing? How are we handling this? And so I thought that when I brought this to my blended learning experiences and how I would be teaching other adults, if I have a really small group and I've set this whole procedure, building in flexibility, building in times for feedback, building in times for that engagement to make sure everybody's on the same page so that everybody leaves having learned, leaves ready to take action and do what I want them to do, which is invest in blended learning, introduce it in their classrooms, and try it out. So I took a lot from a frustrating experience that ended up being very positive, but could have just been very frustrating. And then these are the resources that I used throughout. And I dove into UDL and UBD a little bit more in my paper. Hope you enjoy. Bye.